hi. If you like the show, can you please leave a review wherever you listen to your podcast? Especially if you're listening on Apple, because it seems to really matter over there. Besides, you don't even have to write anything. Leaving 5 stars will do. If you don't like the show, however, well, that's your choice. But if you do like the show, it's a great way to help spread the word about the podcast and show your support. Believe me, I'm incredibly grateful. Alrighty, now on to the show. Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Lamya H to talk about their memoir, Hijab Butch Blues. In Hijab Butch Blues, we see Lamya navigate their identity and life between their religion and culture, and how she compares their experiences with some of the most famous stories in the Quran. Now, growing up, the 3 things I was told not to talk about is sex, money, and religion. But in this episode, we talk all things religion. Now, I'm a Christian who attended church school, specifically Methodist church school, from the age of 3 until I was 18, and I found myself sharing parallels with Lamya despite being from a different culture and practicing a completely different religion. So, we talk about religion being a way to live more intentionally. We talk about social justice, and we talk about Lamya's choice to write under a pseudonym and using a silhouette for their photo. But Lamya also gives us great book and bookstore recommendations, reading tips, plus lots more. So let's get into the episode because I can't wait for you to listen to my chat with author Lamya H. A memoir to add to your reading list is A Living Remedy by Nicole Chung. From the best-selling author of All You Can Ever Know, A Living Remedy is a memoir of a daughter's search to understand the lives her adoptive parents led, the life she forged as an adult, and the grief she experienced when she lost them both. A Living Remedy is also a memoir that exposes a broken healthcare system and the guilt one feels when you're not able to care for your loved ones. Ultimately, A Living Remedy is a super relatable memoir that tells the story of a daughter who felt robbed of the opportunity to give back to her parents. So be sure to add A Living Remedy by Nicole Chung to your reading list. It's available now in bookstores everywhere and wherever books are sold. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is a former Lambda Literary Fellow whose writing has appeared in numerous publications. But she's here on the couch with me to talk about their memoir, Hijab Butch Blues. Please welcome to the couch, Lamya H. Hey Lamya.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on here.
Absolutely, I'm super excited to have you here. Can't wait to talk about your memoir, Hijab Butch Blues. But before we get started, I want to know how you're feeling. Your memoir has been out there in the world for a little time now. It's been a few weeks. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
Wow, that's a really great question. Thank you for starting with that. I'm feeling good. So it's been about a month that my memoir has been out, and it's been really, it's been a whirlwind, and it's really interesting because when I was writing the memoir, I kind of forgot that other people would read it. And so now just like having it out in the world and having people read it and, give me feedback, or just like, asking me questions about it has been like both really lovely and like really like terrifying.
I can just imagine, because you've been doing this by yourself and now, it's like communal. We're all reading, enjoying, commenting, asking questions, which is also why I'm super excited to have you here. But before, I really dive into the book, which I found incredibly fascinating, interesting, mind-opening, even for me, I want readers to hear it straight from you. Tell us about Hijab Butch Blues and what they can expect when they pick up a copy.
So, Hijab Butch Blues is a memoir, and it's about my life. And what I was trying to do in this book is retell stories from the Quran as queer brown immigrant narratives and intersperse it with stories from my queer brown immigrant life. I talk a lot about sort of like figures from the Quran as like messy and complicated and just like deeply human, and really use those stories as starting points to reflect on my life as a queer Muslim, womanish, non-binary person, who's living in the U.S. and who has faced various discrimination and just like situations in life.
Right, right, absolutely. Well, let me start by first commenting on the structure, which I found incredibly interesting. The memoir is divided in three parts, and within each part, you have an essay, kind of. That's how I received it, like an essay. And you were discussing religious figures, prophets, folks that you read stories about in the Quran and putting your own twist on it. So, one, I want to kind of ask you about the structure. Why did you decide to, one, divide it in three parts? Tell us about each part. And why use prophets from the Quran to kind of tell your story?
So the parts are roughly divided into sections where in the first part I talk about my childhood. We moved from the country that I was born in to a country in the Middle East where my parents, just had jobs and were working. And so it explores sort of mostly living as a South Asian in the Middle East. And then the middle section is mostly about moving to the US and really sort of like coming into both my queerness and my Muslimness and really thinking through how I want to live both of those things. And then finally, the third section is about, I think of it almost like a queer adolescence, just like a real sort of like reckoning with what it means to be a person in the world, how I want to love in ways that are expansive, not just romantic, but also in terms of community, in terms of sort of like organizing and fighting for justice and fighting for a better world.
Right, right. I love that. And it was interesting, I have to say, because I grew up in an incredibly religious household. My family is very Christian. I went to church school from the age of 3. I was in, I guess by American standards, that's pre-K, kindergarten, prep school, high school, all of that was church school. And my association with religion has always been what it's against and not what it's for. So it was quite interesting, your interpretation, because I do believe, and I can't speak for other religions, just my own, but even reading Hijab Butch Blues, I felt the way you approached the prophets and these religious figures that we read about in our respective religions is that they're human, they had doubt, and you opened with a story, with Abraham, in the first page in the preface, and I was like, I know this story. I recognize these stories. The first part when you were talking about Miriam, for me it's the Virgin Mary, and you seeing yourself in these religious figures. So I guess my question is, in a world where we live, where religion is mostly shared in a way where it's telling us what it's against instead of what it was for, how could you find your way through, I guess is what it is. How are you able to commune with it and be a part of it when historically and present day, I feel it's more about what it's against instead of the people it is for. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And that's such a interesting framing too, because yeah, so I think what people sometimes forget about religion is that it's meant to be a way to live really intentionally, or at least that's what it's been for me. is that, I don't know, instead of sort of like focusing on what is or isn't, sanctioned by various interpretations, I don't know, I found myself coming back to this idea of, well, how do I want to live? How do I want to put effort into how I live? How do I want to be really intentional about, just like not just my day to day, but just how I'm spending my years, the like limited amount of years that we have in our lives. And to me, religion, it honestly, it gave me one way to live. And I know it doesn't work for everyone. And, there are lots of other ways to be intentional about your life. But for me, it really feels like a way to be present and to be grateful and to really think through what I want out of my day to day. That's definitely not something that was that I learned in school. So I went to an Islamic school growing up, and there was definitely like a lot of like rules and a lot of like, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not supposed to do. And it's interesting because I feel like I had parallel paths almost with how to like live my queerness and how to live my Muslimness, in the sense that I had to really figure out which parts of those identities I want to hold on to, which parts serve me, which parts, bring me closer to living an authentic life, and which ones don't. And it's not that they weren't like at war with each other, those two identities, which I think is a very common misconception. But for me, it was more just, I had to figure out how to live both of those identities and not listen to the ways that other people wanted me to live those identities. I had to like really put effort into how I want to live queerness, how I want to live Muslimness. And it really helped to be doing those both at the same time.
Right, right, absolutely. I appreciated kind of hearing you say that, because in a way, I think, and it's kind of sad because there are things about my religion that I love, but then there are other things that I'm at odds with. But I love the fact that it's more of a guide on how we want to live our lives, instead of this rigidity of should,
Right.
and there is no other way. Because another part of me feels that sometimes there are things that were lost in translation. I think sometimes when even things are translated within their own language, it's just the way we interpret it, can be different. So my question is, did you feel like some things were lost in translation, whether you're reading the Quran in English or reading it when you were in school in Arabic? Did you feel anything was maybe lost, or maybe the way your teachers read it or your parents read it or how you read it were just very different?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because in Islam, there's the text, there's the Arabic text, and then there are almost sort of like canonical interpretations of the text. There are various sort of like schools of thought, and like a scholar who sort of like interprets the words in the text itself will like differ based on what sort of like school of thought they follow. And most of these people are men, and so again, and most of these people are like cis straight men, and so I feel like a lot of the interpretations also tend to reflect some of the misogyny and the homophobia and the and just the just the context of their lives. And so to me, it was really important to have my own relationship with the text. And so it was really important to me to interpret it for myself. I don't have, my Arabic is not great. And so I was still relying on someone else's, word for word translation, although it's good enough to know when something feels egregiously wrong. But for me, a really powerful part of both writing this book and an approach, and in terms of an approach to the Quran and to the text, was like really being able to think through what the text means to me. And and yeah, maybe this is a little cheesy, but like sometimes I think of the the text almost being like addressed to me in the sense that it's addressed to all of us. And how does that change my relationship with it if, all of these verses are ones that I'm supposed to be learning from and that are, not about some like saintly figure who lived 14 to 1500 years ago, but actually about present day life and addressed to me.
I love hearing that because my unpopular opinion, especially when I'm having conversations with my family or just members of my church community, is these prophets weren't perfect. You know, they
Mm.
had doubt, they were asking questions, which brings me back again. And this isn't a spoiler, you guys, just, the preface when you were talking about Ibrahim, which he's asking questions. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
I believe in you, I trust in you, but are you really going to do this thing? And I think that's completely normal. And we are, I feel, perfectly imperfect and flawed human beings just trying to live and exist in this world in a way where we can all see and respect and understand each other. So just you using your religious text to kind of share that with the world, I thought was incredibly beautiful and masterful, quite honestly, because I would have never thought to do something like that. It's just, it worked for me.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, and I think again, like one of the most powerful things about faith is that it does waver and it does have room for doubt and it does have room for questions, and growth. And those are things that I hope are always part of both my faith and my life, because, again, I think it makes you more intentional in how you live, and it really makes you uh, think through um, everything that's going on in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to get to part two, kind of segueing into part three of your book, where it's really, I think, more your university life. And
Mm.
you went to university in the States, and, there's a part in the book where you really get into the social justice of it all. And I think that's a very core feature in your book. And you yourself faced discrimination. But when you're on your college campus and you're interacting with people from all walks of life, in the book, I picked out a note when you were saying that you noticed that there were other people who were experiencing mistreatment, other immigrants, Black students, and just anyone who was not white or didn't appear to be white. But you also kind of compared it to the country where your parents and I think it's your brother still live, that, there is this hierarchy in the world, but also at the same time, while we're living our respective lives, it's important for us to kind of recognize that and stand against rather discrimination in all its shapes and forms. So how were you able to find your community? How were you able to forge your circle in the
Mm.
midst of all of that while still, fighting for social justice, which it was very clear in the book you're so passionate about?
Yeah, I think I definitely have always found myself gravitating towards people who feel similarly and who are similarly fighting for social justice. I think between sort of like organizing and activism, it was fairly easy to find people like that. What is interesting, though, um, is that to me, finding community, especially community members who were sort of like queer and Muslim or Muslim-ish or queerish, and just really like figuring out how to navigate those identities, really helped me grow into myself. And even sort of like in terms of organizing and fighting, I had to learn how to do that in ways that were sustainable, which which segues into the third section of the book. But I think one of the biggest things that I had to learn was, how do you fight in ways that don't lead to you burning out? How do you
Mhm.
fight ways that, conserve your energy, but also allow you to really stand up for what you think is right?
Absolutely. I think that's something I had to learn myself because as a Black woman, just being in corporate America and just corporate anywhere, even before I moved to the States, it's, facing microaggressions on a daily basis, feeling the need to always have to, correct people and fix things while also going out in your community and fighting for the
Mhm.
things you believe in. It can be incredibly exhausting. So, I had to find balance myself and not wait till I'm depleted, but
Mm.
instead being able to do as much as I'm able to do, but also walk away before my cup is empty, because that can happen.
Yeah. And I remember in my 20s, I like fought everyone all the time in ways that were not generative and not productive. Like it didn't end up changing their minds. And so I had to like really learn how to like ask questions or like share personal stories, which, is exhausting in and of itself. But like I had to really learn how to deal with the micro and sometimes macro aggressions.
Mhm.
In ways that a both felt like they were working, and then b didn't tire me out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Lamia, I want to get into your writing life really quick because you chose to write your memoir under a pseudonym.
Mhm.
Tell me about that decision, and also kind of tying it in. When I look at your book jacket, the author section at the back, it's a silhouette. I'm assuming it's you. So you're also not showing your face. So it's pseudonym, no face. Tell me about this decision. And do you also feel like sometimes some of your narrative gets lost because
Mhm.
of using a pseudonym and also kind of masking your face?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's definitely one that I've been thinking about a lot. I started writing in 2014 under the pseudonym, and so it's one that I've used for a while. And the main reason I write under a pseudonym is for privacy and safety. I, don't want to be Googleable. It's a hard world out there for queer people, for Muslims, people who are visibly both, either. Um, and there's definitely like I feel very good about this decision, and part of like my learning to have boundaries was to sort of like trust my gut on what does and doesn't feel safe, what feels like, what makes me feel like I can be very, very honest in my writing. But unexpectedly, or maybe expectedly, I don't know, there's been like some sadness associated with that, and a big part of it is just not being able to name details. Like I'd love to be able to talk about the country that I grew up in. I'd love to talk about the country where I was born, and like really talk about sort of like the specifics of the discrimination that I grew up with, for example. But I felt like I couldn't do that because I had to think through sort of like my boundaries.
Well, I love that. I love the fact that there are boundaries because I also think that's an important part of navigating what like to call an increasingly public world.
Hmm.
All right. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, because I also know you write for publications as well, even though this is your debut and your memoir, but if you could tell your younger writing self anything, Lamia, what would it be?
Um, just to sort of like pitch everything and aim big. I think part of the reason I was able to uh, get essays into sort of like bigger publications is just by doing it. So I think that was one piece of advice that I was really grateful to receive as a younger writer. And then also just that writing can be a really great way to sort of like think through and channel rage, and to not shy away from that.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I know you've just finished this book and it's now out there in the world, but are you working on any other projects, Lamya?
I am. I'm working on a book that is fiction. And I'm not at the point where I can talk very much about it because I'm still sort of like thinking through it.
Hmm.
But I've started writing and I'm super excited about it.
Yay, amazing. All right, let's get into your reading life really quick. I know we're here to talk about Hijab Butch Blues, but I want to know what you're reading. So tell me about the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Um, uh, Such a good question. I've been reading 99 Nights in Logar, which is about this Afghani American boy going back to Afghanistan and sort of like hanging out with his cousins. And it does a really beautiful job of telling sort of like a complicated political story through these like four kids who are hanging out. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed that. And then other things that I've been reading, I read a lot of fiction in general. I've been reading a lot of queer Muslim fiction for a while, so that's been really fun. I have a list up on my Twitter that I can link to. But some of the ones that I've been really enjoying, I recently read Bushra Rahman's Roses in the Mouth of a Lion, which is about this Pakistani American girl growing up in Queens. And I just thought it was just so beautifully done. And then I really liked Zain Jokhadar's 30 Names of Night, which is another sort of like queer trans Muslim story that's just really intriguing. There's a mystery, and then there's also just a lot of really beautiful descriptions of birds and flora.
Amazing. What would you say was your favorite childhood book growing up?
Oh, I read so much in my childhood that in retrospect I'm like, what I don't know. Did you read Enid Blyton as a kid? I feel like it's a very
Yes,
like colonized subject thing.
it
And then if
is.
you like reread it as an adult, you're like, wow,
Oh,
this
yeah,
is really racist and like
it is.
just really messed up. So I definitely read a lot of her. But I do remember reading, I remember picking up White Teeth by Zadie Smith when I was maybe like 14 or 15. And it blew my mind because I was embarrassingly old when I realized that you could write books about brown people. And I just like remember it being the first book that I had read with people of color that was about people of color and about like different people of color interacting with each other as opposed to, some of the other books that I read growing up. So that was a big sort of like turning point in my reading. And I was definitely at that point, I was like, what can I get my hands on that isn't about white people that tells these like complicated stories?
I know. I mean, that's one of the things I think about often, just how blessed these children are nowadays. There's still so much work to do, but yeah, it was hard. You didn't real
Yeah.
I didn't realize the same thing. It's not you, it's me too.
Yeah.
So now we have just, diverse books out there. Again, more work needs to be done, but yeah, definitely grateful that world is
Yeah.
there. And I love Zadie Smith, by the way. She's amazing.
Me too. Yeah, it was definitely slim pickings in our times, especially like around queer books as well. Yeah, so it's so exciting to see so much cool YA and just like fiction coming out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead?
I'm really excited for a lot of just a lot of new fiction that's coming out. One of the ones that I'm super excited about that's coming out in April is Sarah Cypher's "The Skin and Its Girl," which is about this Palestinian girl. Yeah, I'm really excited to read it.
It's good. Okay, I'm just gonna say I've read it. I was like, no, I'm not gonna talk about it. It is so good.
Really? Okay, cool.
I loved it. I got an early copy. Amazing, amazing, amazing. All right. So, as readers, we love books, we love authors, we just love bookstores and booksellers and just everything literary. But sometimes we have reader problems. So, if someone is listening right now and they're having trouble getting back into reading or they're going through
Mm.
a reading slump, what advice would you give them?
So this happened to me recently. Um, And the reason why it happened is just like such a crazy story. What happened was that so I've been keeping a record of every single thing I've read since like 2006, with sort of like quotes and like a little write up, and all of this has been in a Word doc because the cloud didn't exist in 2006. And recently I lost that doc because my laptop got stolen. And it was just so tragic because it felt like I lost like this like archive of my thoughts. And I had a really hard time getting back into reading because I was just like, for like 3 months, I was like, that's it. I'm never going to read anything again in my life. That's it. It's over. And then of course, like I couldn't stay away, but it definitely like took a little while to sort of like let myself feel all of that grief and let it just move through that grief. But yeah, I think going back to something you've read already that you're rereading is really helpful in cases like that. It can feel really fun to sort of like know where all of the grooves are and know where all of your favorite parts are and look forward to it. So that definitely helped me. And then also just reading things that I was really excited about, and just not like forcing myself to finish something, that really helped too. Just finding a book that I was really, really into.
Right. Amazing. I love that advice. So we also love bookstores and booksellers on this podcast. So share with us some of your favorite indie bookstores.
My favorite in New York right now, which is where I live, is Blue Stockings. It's a radical feminist bookstore that has a lot of really cool events. It has just a beautiful curated selection of books, and it also sells things like zines and t-shirts and posters. And it's just like a really, really cool space. I used to live on that block a few years ago, and so it just has a really, really special place in my heart.
Amazing. All right. Well, getting back to Hijab Butch Blues and kind of just wrapping things together again, I know you've done your job. You've written the book, you've given it to us. I read it, I loved it. And readers out there, I really hope you'll give this one a go, pick up a copy and read it. But in an ideal world, Lamya, what are you hoping readers might feel or think? Or what reactions are you hoping they might have after they've turned the last page?
I think I really want readers to walk away with the sense that mess is generative, and that it's okay to have complicated feelings and ask complex questions about everything. And the other thing that I really want readers to walk away with after reading this book is that it's possible to love in ways that feel really intentional, and that are rooted in a deep sense of creating community.
Amazing. I love it. Lamya, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.